Now, Miguel, there is a possibility, and it's a high possibility that I'm going to screw up a lot of pronunciations. It's almost guaranteed. So
It's no problem.
yeah, if you're able to correct me, I will say re-say it so I have it recorded. But
Cool.
yeah, thank you. And it's Miguel Zenon.
Yep.
Okay, Miguel Zenon, welcome to Something Came from Baltimore.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now I come across albums and I get excited about them, and this one has been I've been playing for a while, and we've had like about a month about maybe when we can do our interview because I think you've been touring for a really long time on this album. So
I've
and
been Yeah, we've been touring a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, so you had a little break that we're able to talk about it, and it's something that normally I chit chat about the weather or how you feeling, blah blah blah, and then we get right into the album. But the album it's too intense. There's too much stuff going on, so I want to talk about it. Although you're from Puerto Rico, and you normally like focus a lot of your material on like folklore or the Puerto Rican experience. Dumb question. Why is Puerto Rico not a state of America? What's the problem?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I mean, it could involve a really long, extended answer. Um, so Puerto Rico, like if you want to know a little bit about the history of how this came to happen, the relationship with the United States, it started in 1899 when Puerto Rico was basically invaded by the United States and it was taken over from Spain. Uh, and then there was another sort of like a specific event that happened in 1917 when there was a law passed that was called the Jones Act that basically gave all Puerto Ricans citizenship. So it's been sort of a process of like building Puerto Rico into a place where it can be more part of this country, but that process never got as far as it did with other places like Hawaii, for example, or Alaska, which went through a similar process, but eventually became states. In the case of Puerto Rico, for some reason, that step was never taken, and it's sort of like this political limbo that Puerto Rico sort of lives on, which is pretty unique, even in today's modern political world. So, short answer is I don't know why, but I also don't. I'm also not totally confident that that would be the best solution moving forward. So I think there's a lot of options and a lot of things that can be taken into consideration.
Yeah. I mean, we can get really dirty and just say that, they tried to exploit the population and put a lot of factories and once that kind of didn't work that well, they kind of abandoned everything and allowed the whole island to go bankrupt in a weird way. And bottom line is the Puerto Rican people cannot vote like unless they're on mainland,
Yeah,
and so they have no say as to what goes on to them. And well, they never prepare the grid or the country, and now there's super rich people all over America or over the world that have like started to buy up large swaths of population, and they're squeezing out people, the indigenous people. So yeah, you're right.
yeah.
There's a lot of
There's
stuff
a
going
lot of
on.
a lot of stuff going on. Yes, for sure.
Did I get any of that wrong?
No, I mean it's pretty much all right. I mean, like I said, this could be a very long conversation just about
Just
Puerto
about Puerto
Rican
Rico.
politics and just the state of the country. I will say that for another time. But I
Yeah,
appreciate you asking because most people are really not aware of
yeah. I love Puerto Rico. It's one of my favorite places to visit. I can't understand why it's so expensive to travel there.
it.
It seems
Me
like it
neither.
would be, huh?
Me
It seems
neither.
like
I don't know why it's so expensive.
yeah, you can go to Fort Lauderdale or even to Cuba for half the price, three times the price less than what you can go to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to get into this album. You're taking way too much time, Miguel. So the album is amazing. Now, there's a
Thank you.
a lot of thought behind your songs, and I interviewed Arturo Farrell and I interviewed Emmanuel Wilkins. And what's great about the music is that there's a lot of like subtext behind it that represents kind of what you're going with it. Um, when someone buys this album, there is documentation as to where you're going with each song.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Someone really needs to buy your album, the CD, or and read the liner. Like you have it basically well documented as to where your thought process was for each song.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, it's this idea of of making music based on a source is something that I've been interested on for a while, and sometimes the sources are very much musical, or like you mentioned before, I've explored the music of Puerto Rico and other places in Latin America and try to translate that into what I do. In this case, it was very similar, but I feel that a lot of times, of course, I want to break it down and tell folks, okay, this is kind of where this came from, or this is where the idea came from. But ultimately, the source is is for me as a music creator, to have a platform. That's just something that you know makes things a little more organic for me. Like it just makes things feel more natural. It's
Yeah,
just the way I think. You know,
yeah,
I like to have a platform just to kind of jump off from instead of just starting from zero, and just totally dependent on muse and inspiration. I like to have something that I can draw on. And in this case, I was looking into history and I was looking into a lot of literature and the history of this part of the world. And it kind of ignited a lot of ideas that I found interesting, both from a socio political perspective, but also from an artistic, creative perspective. So it ended up kind of manifesting itself into a series of pieces and then into this project. I mean, I break it down in the liner notes, and whenever I do interviews, I try to break it down in terms of where the music is coming from. But I always like to point out that you know I could give you a reference. I could say this song came from this, but ultimately the listener is going to find their way, into the music and how the music speaks to them.
well, 100%. So I've listened to this album multiple times and had no idea there anything. I was like, oh, this is a hot album. It has a lot of Latin, like a Latin vibe to it that I appreciate. I think that they call it tropical Latin. It seems to be like kind of dissipated through the last 20 years, where it's not really prevalent because, and I don't know why. I think because maybe it's expensive to make. You have a big band, but your percussion is crazy, and you have a lot of stuff going on. So I'm enjoying the album. And then I went and got a little deeper, and I said, "Ooh, this is fun," because because the music stands alone, but when you like now you have a thought piece attached to it. Like these are your thoughts and ideas that are generating these. So I mean, it gives a person the opportunity to let it listen to what's going on and then think about where you're going with it. It's I call it homework. You're giving them homework, but in a good way if they choose to take it, and if they don't, they just have this rocking album that's amazing. um so during the pandemic, you read a book, and this is the Open Veins of Latin America, the um, the 5 centuries of pillage of the continent. Now I know it's something else in Spanish, but that's what the
Mm-hmm.
English version is.
Yeah.
Now, just by that title, I kind of know where that's going. Uh, the raping and pillage of her 5 centuries. Um, it doesn't change, does it? Like, when I'm thinking about, you know, to that modern day, which is the complexity of it, is that you're looking back at like uh, figures who maybe uh, or just people in the past, or indigenous people from the past. You're looking at different things and correlating them, and then you compare them to America, And when it comes to like the economy and politics and stuff, it's almost identical to what it was before. So it doesn't seem to change.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, this book that you mentioned by Eduardo Galeano is sort of a classic, you know, in Latin American literature and political literature in general. It was actually written in the 70s. And I've known about the book for a while. I've kind of glanced at the book a couple times, but, you know, having a little more time during this past couple of years, I kind of went a little deeper. And like you said, I mean, the first thing that kind of jumped out at me was how timeless a lot of this things are. You know, it's just something that's happened before this book, and it's gonna happen just because of the way the world works and because of human nature. I mean, this is of course the book is specifically referencing to America, in this case specifically Latin America, but this stuff happens all over the world. You know, there's the weak and the strong, and this is kind of like what sets things in motion. What was really interesting about a lot of these things that I read, including this book, were how, you know, a lot of these ideas and a lot of these movements and initiatives that have to do with politics, that have to do with power and oppression and revolution and all these things, they really ignite, um, you know, a cultural personality, you know, which in in part gives way to artistic expression and you know the things that we kind of grasp on as artists. So it was that was one of the things that was most informative to me because I was, you know, of course I'm trying to draw out of this project and try to turn it or translate it into a musical perspective, into a musical vehicle. So you can't really separate these things. You know, I mean, that's one thing that's very clear to me and a lot of clear to many of us. It's like, you know, if you're an artist, you have to look into what's going on. You have to look into life, and you have to look into history. It's not just about notes and chords and rhythms. You know, it's about the world we live in and the kinds of things that are happening around us and how we can, you know, portray that in whatever it is, whatever expression we're using. In this case, it's music, but whatever it is we're doing, whatever it is we're doing, is going to be a manifestation of what's going on in the world and what's happened you know in this part of the world specifically. That's kind of what I was interested on. But like you said, I mean, history repeats itself in many ways, and the wheel keeps going, and things, you know, stay in motion, and you know we follow along.
Yeah, it's almost on the verge of light and darkness. You know, like we can live in the light, we can live in the darkness, and it's a pendulum of darkness that comes in your life. You know, that either you create or it's been created for you, and it swings back and forth. Um, this the first song I'm going to play a sample from, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Is Venice Abde hold it Abiatus Venice
Venas
Abiatus.
abiertas. Yeah,
Wow,
venas abiertas. Yeah.
that is not too bad. So that we're gonna play a sample of that song, and that's really was uh, from the book that motivated you to compose that song. One of the things about the whole piece that you're talking about is that you're talking look at the continent of America. So because we're in America, we believe that everything revolves around us. That you're like, oh, this is about, you know, America, Mexico, and Canada, where you're talking about the whole Americas, the whole continent thing that all connects together, and
Hmm.
as we're as one. I don't know. As a little kid, I always looked at the globe and I said, look, the Atlantic Ocean, if you get rid of that, it fits all together. We're all together.
Hmm.
And I was like, does anyone else see this? Like, is it just me? um, so you're looking at America, the country, which, you know, we're getting into a political uh, bloodbath, and tomorrow is our last day with elections. That we are so entrenched in being inclusive as just us, as opposed to as a we, which is the whole Americas. So that's an arching theme that you have incorporated within this album of yours.
Yeah, no, no, definitely. One of the things that I would say, if there was one thing that pushed me towards this project, is the idea of sort of understanding and redefining, at least in my perception, what it means to be from this part of the world. Like when you say America, in most parts of the world these days, when you say America, you use that in reference specifically to the United States. Whereas America is a very vast piece of land with a few different continents all connected together. Um, and I started thinking about, historically how this came to be, how the United States was redefined in terms of terminology, just to be referenced as America, and I you know, lo and behold, I discovered that it had a lot to do with Puerto Rico. You know, I mentioned this United States kind of taking over Puerto Rico in 1899, along with the Philippines and Guam and a couple other territories. And this was around the time when the United States went from being a country to becoming an empire, meaning it's not just what's in the land, but there's other places outside of the land that also belong to this political power, you
Mm.
know. And it was around that time that the term America was coined to refer to the United States of America, because it wasn't just the states anymore; it was the states plus, you know,
Ah.
which I found really interesting.
Hmm.
And a lot of the ideas about what we use to reference to, when we say American music, or even when we say Latin American or African American, that could be a really broad definition, or it could be really narrow, and it kind of depends on how you look at it. I thought that whole idea was really interesting, and I was trying to kind of like explore that idea and think about that idea a lot when I was looking into the project and writing the music, and just looking into the different directions where this project could go.
We're gonna play. I have three more tracks that I want to sample throughout our conversation. Um, yeah, I always think of Arturo Farrell. I interviewed him multiple times. He's so passionate. Like I really think he should go into politics, because he he hits the nerves that drive like me like crazy. I want to keep on. Yeah, it's interesting how you're very diplomatic, and something that is can be very very emotional and painful. It could be
Mhm.
real, and your approach to it is just a quiet observer who just happens to bring up an album about the topic. Okay, so the second song I wanted to talk about is the navigation, the homage to the sea faring culture that existed in the Caribbean, where they were using the night light to travel. And I'm going to say the word. It's navegando,
Navegando, that means sailing.
navegando.
Yeah.
Did it. So you're basically using how a native uh, principle is really interesting to today. I don't think we would freak out if we had to do that, and maybe our even technology wouldn't be as helpful and exact as they were back then.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting to me. I mean, and of course, this is not exclusive to this societies in the Americas. This, you can see this in the Polynesian, and other places, and other continents, where, like, especially societies and civilizations that live surrounded by water or live close to water, they use the sea as their main vehicle, as their main road, basically, and they use sailing as their main means of transportation. So it was just incredible for me to start seeing how this individuals could travel such large distances, just basically using the stars, and using nature. And for me, what really did it was this idea of like, how do you define an advanced society or an advanced civilization? When there was the encounter with Europe and the Americans, a lot of the Europeans, they viewed these societies as underdeveloped and sort of barbaric societies because they didn't have what they have, they didn't dress the way they dressed, or they didn't, whatever, they didn't have like swords and things but it was, when you look at something like this, or even when you look at some of the societies and these empires, like the Aztecs and the Mayans and all the scientific advancements they had, is really, I mean, you have to think about it in broader terms when you think about an advanced society and about, you know, how scientific discoveries could influence societies in different ways. So this was one of the songs that really I tried to use as a platform to pinpoint that specific idea of, these are people that were able to do a lot a very long time ago without having the stuff that they had in the other side of the world.
There's great vocals on this. It remind me of Lost Van Van, if I said that right. Like their vocals.
Yeah, yeah. Los Van Van is one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, aren't they great? I got to see them at Key West one time. It was like mind blowing.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I've seen them like 10 times.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an emotional experience. You walk out like drenched, and it's primal. It's fun. Um,
Yeah.
the next song is I'm gonna screw this up, but it's Oppression, a Revolution, or
Operación, yeah, that's perfect. Operación y Revolución. Oppression and Revolution. That's a
uh,
that's a kind of an easy
it's
translation.
you're basically using Haitian revolutions and the tension amongst the desire to pull that country or abandon that country and keep on doing it back and forth. Maybe taking it under their wing and also kind of abandoning it, especially during like currently about really horrible times that they've had suffered.
Yes.
This is really about the constant battle of, I guess, of that civilization of survival.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, of course, I was using a lot of information from Haitian music and thinking about the Haitian Revolution specifically, but on broader terms, I was really trying to exemplify the idea of revolution caused by oppression, which is universal and it's been manifested in many, many instances in the history of this continent, not only in Latin America, and you talk about Haiti. I mean, you could talk about this country of the United States and many other places where, the oppressed have gotten to a point where they just say, we've had enough, and we're going to fight back, even if there's no chance of us, being successful. So I was using the idea of the Haitian Revolution specifically as a model because it was successful, and it was. I think it was the only time in history, at least in modern history, where a slave revolt has been successful. But then you look at the other side of the coin, the flip side of that, like you said, and you look at all the struggles that country has had over time, and you have to pay attention to that and the way the world has basically turned its back on this country, which is like smack in the middle of the Americas.
Yeah,
And then you also have to look at the actual effects, cultural and musical effects that the Haitian Revolution had in, in, in American music. And you can make a point that there wasn't another event uh, aside from the Middle Passage and the African diaspora into the African forced diaspora into the Americas. This event was as important as any other event you can think of because the Haitian Revolution was like an explosion of information that basically was sent to Havana, to New Orleans, to Bahia and Brazil and all these places. They kind of took all these cells and they fed into his music. I mean, you could trace the history of jazz music to the Haitian Revolution in more ways than one. So I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
the last song we're going to play is Bambula, uh, and has a fantastic Percussion by Victor Emanuela.
Yeah,
I,
Emanuele, yeah.
I'm getting better. It was a dance that was brought over by African slaves, and it's changed the habanero, in time.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah,
that, and you're connecting the time and space, the thread between New Orleans to Brazil, exactly what you're saying to Central America,
yeah.
back
So
to
very similar
Africa.
to what I was just
Yeah.
saying now, exactly. So this is sort of like a musical cell that came from Africa to the Americas, and eventually kind of found its way everywhere. We were talking just now about the Haitian Revolution. This was one of the ways, one of the cells that kind of found its way into other
Yeah.
parts of the world. I mean, and you can find that everywhere. I mean, this is even now. You turn on the radio, you listen to reggaeton. This is what you're gonna hear. Tones, 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 tones. And that's what bambula is. You know?
There's the slave trade. We just assume it's just because we're in America that everyone was brought to America, which is not true. They were brought, all over the place, and so you feel like there's in Brazil there's African really intense ancestry and um, rituals that are over there that wouldn't have been over there if it wasn't for the slave trade. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's that's a whole different story that we can't get into.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but I think it's important to understand that there really wasn't a part of the American continent that was not affected by this encounter between Africa and the Americans. You know, especially culturally and musically. I mean, it would be something totally different. You know, that hadn't been
Yeah,
the case. So
I
I
mean,
think it's important to understand that.
I don't know. I mean, and my theory is that that savaged the country, just raped it of youth and energy and all those bodies were sent elsewhere, betrayed by their country and brought over and treated like for a year. I mean, it's just something that no one's healed from. And in America, we're never going to know about it because the books are being changed as we speak. So
Mm.
it never happened. So so for that reason, it's going to take a long time for us to heal. Um, I love your album, and
Thank you.
we get these albums, and I'm like, oh, well, I like this. I like the album cover. So I was like, let me listen to it, and I said, I'm way into this. And then I was like, I got it. Like I knew the time passed, and a lot of times I'm trying to do really current stuff, but it's great because it gives people who are looking for new stuff, if they haven't picked you up yet, to give you a spin. Because I only interview people that I'm really fanatical about the album. So I'm lucky that way. I get to pick who I get to want to interview. So I feel like
Appreciate
if,
that.
if if people have not listened to this album yet, I'm encouraging them to give it a spin. I think they're going to love it. One of the things I said to Arturo Farrell is that uh, to me, jazz is universal. Jazz is like uh, freedom of expression. But when it comes to like an NPR playlist, like this Latin music is only segregated into that Latin show on Saturdays at 10 p.m. And I drives me crazy because, in my opinion, this is, if I want to hear this and I want to hear it beside a John Coltrane song, or I want to hear it beside something else. I don't want to wait till Saturday evening to listen to this music. And I don't know why they do it. And I don't know why it's allowed because it shouldn't be allowed. I have no answer for this.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. I mean, I think there's been a lot of progress in this regards, but I think there's still the mentality is still that that we look at the Latin American the what the things that have come from Latin America that have fed jazz music and music from the United States in general. We still kind of put that in a separate box,
It's strange.
almost in an automatic, non-analytical way. And like I feel the same way you do. I feel like it's all kind of coming out of the same place, but it might take a little time just for everyone to kind of be on the same page about this.
Well, I understand that, like, if someone's interested in standards or jazz vocal or historical jazz, then there's boxes. But jazz is the last FM, like, you know, a jazz station is the last FM radio station where you should be able to mix it up and play whatever you want. But I find that maybe Spotify is probably helpful with playlists. Like your tracks are on Spotify. People can sample them, and I find that there's more people who like jazz now. They just don't know who the musician is. You know, like they're like, oh, I love this song, and then they
Yeah,
save it as one of their favorites, and then they have this their own playlist. You know, and
yeah,
then they have to dig in a little deeper and go, okay, there's a whole album here that I need to get into.
yeah.
With,
No, it's
so,
different
yeah,
times for sure.
so this is where we're at, which I think more people are more interested in sampling and tasting and you know, you think someone likes Taylor Swift only, and bang, they're listening to your album also. So you can't deny anyone. Okay, Miguel,
Yeah,
thank.
I think I mean one thing that's positive, and before we say goodbye about everything that we're talking about just now, I mean it is a different time, but there is a lot of good music being made, you know, which I
Yeah,
think it's we always have to take that as a positive. You know, creatively, things keep moving forward and people keep pushing the envelope, and just, you know, no matter what the medium is and no matter how we get into music, the music is there and it's still inspiring.
I agree. Well, one of the things that I do or I think is that people don't realize how much new music, how much exciting stuff is out there. They're stuck in their, you know, a Miles Davis playlist, and you're like, there's nothing good as of 1978, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
true. So, you know, although the 80s did suck for jazz, but other than that, they're back. It's back, and people are being a lot more creative.
Yes.
All right, Miguel, thank you very much for joining me today on Something Came from Baltimore.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you. This was awesome. Um, we are kind of going into repeat, so it's going to be early January. However, how it
Okay.
works is I'm on 3 radio stations. So what they do is they chop up my podcast grid.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be a small version of that probably next week. So that'll be played.
Cool.
Yeah. Then there's a podcast version and a radio station version, a 30-minute version of this interview.
Very
So
nice.
yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. I'll give you stuff as it evolves. Actually, your people, I'll let them know.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
sure. Have a great day. Okay.
All right, you too. Take
All
care.
right. Bye bye.